It gives me great pleasure now to introduce to you An Evening with Mr. Richard Sawyer.
I think I'm going to move these points over here so everyone can see them. Can everyone see those? Okay. How many people have done time travel? Nobody? Oh, you have? Oh, you're fanning. Good day. Tonight, what we'd like to do is go back in time and find out if we can determine who were the first people into what we know as Greenville County and where did they come from. To do this, we're going back in archaeological time. There are 5 time periods we want to cover. The first one is the Paleo-Indian period, and it dates from 50,000 BC to 8,000 BC. The next is the Archaic period. It dates from 8,000 BC to 1,000 BC. The third is the Woodland Period. The Woodland Period, 1,000 BC to 1,000 AD. The next is the Mississippian Period. It dates from, can you still hear that? It dates from 1000 AD into 1600 AD. And the last period is called the Historic Period. Now, each one of these periods can be subdivided down into an early, a middle, and a late period. And by the way, if you have any questions, just holler out. The Paleo period, 50,000 BC to 8,000 BC. It is believed that man crossed the Bering Straits during the last ice age between 50,000 and 8,000 BC. So much water was locked up in the glaciers that the oceans actually dropped by 300 foot. Imagine Charleston, South Carolina, at this time would be 150 miles inland. Now, we find a lot of archaeological sites on the East Coast, but the West Coast seems to be not quite so many, and why not? Why don't they find these early settlements, paleo settlements on the West Coast? Underwater. Remember, the ocean dropped 300 foot. You don't search the shore now, you go out where the ocean would have dropped 300 foot, and that's where the archaeological sites are. Some of the islands up there. It is during this time period, in the late Paleo period, that the first man-made artifacts are found on the North American continent. And one of the oldest, or the oldest, is called a Clovis Point. A Clovis Point is a stone spear point. The unique thing about it, that is unique to the Clovis, it has a side fluting, or a flute taken out of the side. I'm going to tell you about Greenville County in just a second. Now I'm going to pass this one around. Points are generally named after an area in which they were first discovered or by a person who discovered that style of point first. The Clovis Point was first found at Clovis, New Mexico. It was not believed that Clovis people or early human beings and your large fauna existed on the North American continent at the same time. But at Clovis, New Mexico, they found a Clovis Point embedded in a large mastodon. So that proved that they were both here at the same time. Paleo points are very rare in South Carolina, very rare. As of today, only 571 have been found in South Carolina. Points in South Carolina are made from quartz, flint, slate, chert, or other hard rocks. They are made by striking one rock against another rock. And what you'll do is you'll knock off a flake, and I'm going to pass this around. This is called a preform. This is when they first started making a point. And they would continue chipping down, until they got down to the size that they could make an actual point out of. How do we date things? How does archaeologists date things?
Carbon dating.
Carbon dating. What else? Stratification. How about stratification? You can go down in the soil, you can find different stratas, and you can find out how old something is. Okay. For something to be carbon dated, it had to be alive. So how do we date a stone point? Not only will the archaeologists take the artifact itself, but they will take the surrounding dirt. Now, something in that surrounding dirt may have had plant life or something. They can carbon date the plant life. Therefore, on the same strata, you can date the point. What would you do if you were out in a field somewhere and all of a sudden you started finding all these little, quote, arrowhead, projectile points? What would you do? Pick them up, take them home, take them down, chalk your lot, sell them? Okay, what you want to do is you want to record where you found them. You may have found something that has never been seen before. Record. Take it to a local historical society, archaeological group. We have the Foothills chapter over at Duncan. Let someone take a look at it. Take it to a professional archaeologist. They don't want your points. They don't want them, but they want to know where they were recovered from. So at some time, they can go back and do a field search around that area. So it's very important. The Archaic period, 8,000 to 1,000 AD. It was late in the Paleo period to the early Archaic period that the last ice age ended. Temperatures in what is now northwest South Carolina was about the same thing you'd find in southern Canada today. The winters were much colder, the summers were much cooler. It was during this time that man first began hunting in what we know as Greenville County, South Carolina. And how do we know this? We know it from the projectile points that are found in Greenville County. There has been 2½ Clovis Points found in South Carolina. 2½. I happen to be in possession of one that is now at Furman University. I gave it to them. The oldest point that we find any substantial amount of is called a Kirk Point. And this is a Kirk Point right here. And we find quite a bit of those. As a matter of fact, when they widened 25, I found a Kirk Point. Just went down and started looking around and found a Kirk Point. 8,000 BC. Think about that. You pick that up out of the ground, you're the first person to touch that since the person who lost it 8,000 years ago. Just sit around and contemplate that. Pass that one around too. The most common point found in Greenville County is called a Morrow Mountain Point. These are Morrow Mountain Points, and they're named after Morrow Mountain, North Carolina. That's where they were first discovered. Also during the Archaic period, a new hunting weapon came into existence. Prior to the Archaic period, this is what they used. A spear. Think something big as an elephant trying to go after it with this. You don't want to be the one underneath it jabbing up. At the end of the last ice age, most of the large animals disappeared. So now they're hunting deer. Yes?
How do they fasten the point onto that stick?
How do they what?
Fasten the point.
Sinew, animal tendon. You take animal tendon and wet it and wrap it, and it'll shrink down as hard as a rock. That point will break before the sinew will break. Oops, lost my train of thought. Oh, Adelaide. By the end of the time last of the Ice Age, the big animals were gone. So now they're hunting deer, bear, fairly small animals. Do you want to hunt something like that with a spear? You want to go out deer hunting with a spear? So they came up with a new weapon. And this weapon is called an atlatl. A-T-L-A-T-L. An atlatl is a cross between a spear and an arrow. What they did, they hollowed out the rear end of it, and they hollowed out the front end of it. Generally, these were 4 to 6 feet long. They'd take their stone projectile point that they made, put it on a little stick. This is called a foreshaft. They inserted the foreshaft into the front of the atlatl shaft. And then they had what is called a throwing stick that has a little notch on it. And they hooked it on back. And you take this thing and you throw it. World's record, 571 foot.
Dang.
Well, I can get these out 100 yards fairly accurate. Fairly accurate. The unique thing about the atlatl is when it hits the animal, it goes in and the arrow shaft just bounces off. Now, would you rather carry 10, 15 of these or 10 or 15 of these if your animal runs off? Also, the foreshaft doubled as a knife. You're looking at a 10,000-year-old knife. And they will cut. They will absolutely cut. A unique thing about the atlatl, the front of the spear goes faster than the rear of the spear. Someone want to explain that?
Is it completely hollow?
Huh?
Is it completely hollow all the way through?
No, this goes faster than this.
Oh,
Yeah, but he's asking, is it completely hollow all the way through?
No, it doesn't have to be hollow.
Gravity or resistance?
No, let me show you what it does. When you throw the atlatl, you put so much pressure on the rear end of it, it flexes. And that rear end's going faster than the front. After about 5 foot, snap. It'll come right back perfectly straight. But you can see pictures every now and then, somebody throwing one, and oh, it has a big bend in it.
how accurate is carbon dating? How far back can they reliably go before it starts to become unreliable?
Well, they're looking at least 50,000 years. And it's not an exact science. They can't say on June the 2nd, 1 BC, it's usually about 100-year range. About 100-year range. The atlatl speed over throwing a spear is 15 times greater. The impact pressure is 200 times greater. So you stand a much better chance. Plus, what are you doing? Rather than standing there stabbing something, now you have a little distance. And it's going to get greater. It's going to get greater. Before we leave the archaic period, I'll only insert one little thing. Back in 1988, a woman came into my office and brought a stone axe down in Lawrence County, and asked me if I'd come down and take a look around and see if there was anything else down there. Well, I did, and on the way back, I stopped at Fairview Presbyterian Church down on Fairview Road. And as I was going through, if you haven't been there, go there, just to go through the graveyard. Nice stuff down there. I noticed a name on one of the graves, William Scipio Payton. Well, I had a teacher in the 9th and 10th grade at Parker High School, William Scipio Payton. But I looked at the date, so I said, well, that's not him. So I went up to the church office and I asked the secretary up there if she knew who that was. She said, that's Mr. Payton's grandfather. As a matter of fact, Mr. Payton's my husband. I said, really? So she called him, and he came over to the church. First time I've seen him since '64. I have a little book out called 10,000 Years of Greenville County History. He was going through it. And in there I have a picture of a Clovis Point. He said, you know, back in around 1965, 66, we put a pond in on our yard, in our property. He owns a farm down there. He said, I found the point down there that looks something similar to this. I said, I wish. I said, you know, no full ones have ever been found in Greenville County. He said, let's run over to the farm. So we went over there, and he comes out. He got it wrapped up in a net, a little point wrapped up in a net, and he opened it up. It was a Clovis Point. It was a Clovis Point. I'm telling you, my hands were shaking. I said, Mr. Payton, I told him what it was. Always be honest with you. If you find stuff, always be honest with people. I told him exactly what it was. I said, is there any way that you would ever get rid of this point? He said, no. Said, I had a bunch of points in my drawer, and somebody broke into my house and stole all of them out, but they didn't take this one. Wasn't very bright burglars. I said, well, will you let me do this? If you'll let me borrow it for a week, I'll take it down to Columbia, get it registered. We'll get the exact where it was found and all the information. Go photograph it. Took it down. About a week later, I come back and I called Mr. Payton, and I went over there, and he said, let's ride around southern Greenville County. That's where the Paytons are from. A lot of Paytons from down in that area. And we spent all day just riding around southern Greenville County. And we got back to his house, and I had already given the point, and he got out, and he leaned in the window, and he says, oh, by the way, I want you to have this. And he gave me the Clovis Point. I told him, I said, it will never leave Greenville County. Once the archaeologists saw it, they said it's probably one of the best examples of a Clovis Point ever found in South Carolina. Beautiful point, absolute gorgeous point. But like I say, now I'm not getting rid of stuff, but I want to put stuff that's of any historic value somewhere where I'll know it's safe. So I got with Mr. and Miss Payton, we went out to Furman University, and we gave it to Furman. So it's out there. The Woodland Period, 1000 BC to 1000 AD. It is during this period that the bow and arrow was introduced or reinvented on the North American continent. I think we all know what bow and arrows are.
You said that was 1 to 2000 BC?
1000 BC to 1000 AD,
Okay.
Woodland Period.
What were the strings made out of? Was it sinew back then as well?
I'm gonna tell you the honest truth, I don't know. I don't know. I doubt if there's any strings left around, it all rotted away. The bow and arrow had been on the European and African continent since about 30,000 BC. So it was fairly relatively new to North America. It was during this time that they started planting crops. The bow and arrow came in, and they began to form little groups. Up until this time, they were hunter-gatherers. But they were still a fairly good amount of people. It wasn't like 1 or 2 people running around. We also see an introduction of the first pottery on the North American continent. And the oldest pottery found on the North American continent comes from Stallings Island, Georgia. It is also this time that we find arrowheads. We've got the bow and arrow now. And if you look down here at this bottom line, those are arrowheads. You put one of these are addle points. You put one of these on an arrow and shoot it, and it'll just nosedive right over. The Mississippian periods. It was during this time that the tribes were firmly established and territories were established. It is also during this time that we see trading among different tribes and wars for territories. We find the mound builders during this time. There's one mound left in Greenville County that we know of. Don't ask.
What is a mound?
Huh?
What is a mound?
A mound is a center of a village. It's the county seat.
Oh,
They also use them as burial mounds, but most likely they're the county seat. It was late in the Mississippian period, on May 25th, 1540, that the first European made contact with the Cherokee Nation. And this was made by Hernando de Soto near Murphy, North Carolina. The historic period, 1600 to present. We know that prior to 1777, all the land that encompasses what now is Greenville County were Cherokee hunting grounds. So were the Cherokees the first people to come into this area? How many people in here have Indian blood in them? 1, 2, 3. Okay, put your hands down. Let me ask you this. Now, other than those people, how many people in here have O-type blood? Why did you not raise your hand? That you have Indian ancestry. All North American Indians had O-type blood. All North American Indians. If you have O-type blood, you have shovel teeth. Shovel teeth.
What is that?
Your 2 incisors up front. If you run your tongue right behind those teeth, you'll feel a little indentation. Feel it? Okay, so now you know somewhere you've got some Indian ancestry, or Asian, preferably Japanese. The Cherokees are of the Iroquoian family of Indians. Their name may come from Choctaw, which means cave people, or Creek, which means people with a different speech. The Cherokees did not call themselves Cherokees. They were called the Anahueñas. Also heard that they've also been called the Sulajee. So that's what they call themselves. And it means people with a different speech. The Cherokees lived in a land called Saganagawa, land of the Blue Hills, or Great Blue Hills of God. There were 3 settlements of Cherokees, an upper, a middle, and a lower. At one time, the Cherokees claimed land in what is now North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and Kentucky. Where did the Cherokees come from? There are several theories from where the Cherokees came from. A man by the name of Frangie Speck says that he believes the Cherokees came from the Amazon basin. And he bases this on the basket characteristics of some down in that area and of the Cherokee Nation. He believes that they migrated via Mexico to the Great Lakes and settled among the Iroquois. Another man, W.H. Holmes, believes the Cherokees may have come from the Caribbean. And he bases this on similar pottery of the Cherokee and some that you find down in the Caribbean. Another man, John Haygood, holds to the tradition that the Cherokees lived among the Delaware, and there was a war, and the Delawares forced the Cherokees south. And getting so many different ideas where the Cherokees came from, you start asking archaeologists, where do you think they came from? Which one of these is probably true? And every one of them says the same. None of them. They believe the Cherokees may be paleo and just evolved into what we know as the Cherokee Nation. So were the Cherokees the first people into what we know as Greenville County, South Carolina? This will probably never be known. However, we do know when the first men arrived in the Greenville County area, around 8000 BC, and we know that from the artifacts that we find in Greenville County. Historic dates. May the 25th, 1540. DeSoto made contact with the Cherokee Nation near Murphy, North Carolina. He was introduced to the Cherokee by his Creek guide. And his Creek guide, when he asked what the tribe was, the Creek guide said, Cherokee. Now, we've corrupted that so much now, we call them Cherokee. In 1550, a new tribe moved into South Carolina, and this was the Catawba tribe, although this date may not be proven. In 1582, a war between the Cherokee and the Catawba broke out. Basically, the hunting grounds between Kiwitoxaway, Rock Hill, and Columbia was a common hunting ground for both the Cherokee and the Catawbas. In what was called the bloodiest fight ever fought on South Carolina soil, they did battle, but neither could gain an advantage. So a treaty was entered into that no permanent villages would be in this area, but you would have like hunting villages, and it would still be hunting territory for both. By 1674, the population of the Cherokee Nation was 50,000. Not many by today. By 1690s, traders began to infiltrate the Cherokee territory. By 1700, the first firearms were introduced to the Cherokees. In 1729, a smallpox hits the Cherokee Nation, introduced by Europeans. In 1730, in a treaty with the British government, all Cherokee lands are under the protectorate of the British. In other words, if the Cherokee goes with the war with another tribe, the British will intervene on their side. 1738, another smallpox epidemic hit the Cherokee Nation. Okay, here's the date I want you to remember. 1739, Act number 660, passed by the South Carolina legislature, states that Indians may not sell any Indian lands to non-Indians. Very important. By 1753, another smallpox epidemic hit the Cherokee Nation, and now the population has dwindled down to about 25,000. In 1755, in a treaty with the state of South Carolina, or province of South Carolina, the Cherokees are swindled out of most of their lands. Only the present day of Anderson, Greenville, Oconee, and Pickens remains within the hands of the Cherokees. Around 1758, one of these traders among the Cherokees was a man by the name of Richard Paris out of Winchester, Virginia. He takes a side wife. Now, he's married in Virginia, but he takes a side wife with an Indian wife, and he has a son by the name of George. During the French and Indian Wars, the British tried to ally the Cherokees to their sides. Because of the influence of Richard Paris, the Cherokee went on several expeditions with the British. One of the most notable was Fort Decay near Pittsburgh. An expedition was raised against this French fort. A Virginian led it, and Richard Paris with his little band of Cherokees went on this expedition. Who was in command of this expedition? We're going to have a quiz at the end.
George Washington.
George Washington. George Washington started the French and Indian War. He started. The day before the British arrived at Fort Decay, the French burned it and fled. The next day, Richard Paris, along with his little band of Indians, were the first people to go into the fort that had been burned. He boasted the rest of his life that he was the first Englishman to go into Fort Decay at its demise. Following the French and Indian Wars from 1758 until 1768, Richard Paris is appointed Commissioner of Indian Affairs for a very short time. He continues to trade with the Cherokees, although he's living in Virginia. He has a wife in Virginia named Rhoda. He has 3 children, 2 daughters, Sarah and Margaret, and a son named Richard. After the French and Indian War, Richard Paris is on the move, heading south down the old wagon road. In 1768, Richard Paris with his family moved onto what is known the Great Plains of South Carolina. Today we know this as the Reedy River Falls area in downtown Greenville. Any problem there? Any problem? Can you do that? Huh? No. What happened in 1789?
Oh, no Indian lands can be sold to.
Right. Or no settlers could settle within Indian territory. And he is certainly within the Cherokee Nation. In 1773, Richard Paris buys the land that he is illegally sitting on. Can you do that? No. It's prohibited. In November, Richard Paris is taken to 96. In the first court held at 96, Richard Paris is charged with violation of Act of 1739. He was found guilty, fined, and had to renounce his title to his lands. What does Richard Paris do? He goes home like nothing happened. He goes back. In December of 1773, Richard Paris takes 3 Cherokee chiefs to Charlestown. Now, remember I said by his Indian sideway, he has a son by the name of George. He takes George along. He has the 3 Indian chiefs deed to George 150,000 acres, or about 10 square miles, along the Reedy River. Can they do that? Sure they can. Cherokee to Cherokee. They can do that. Richard Paris then has George sent to England. 4 months later, here comes George back. Now he is declared a British citizen. So he sells his father Richard 100,000 of the 100,050 acres. Now can he do that? British. Sure can. First land fraud in Greenville. It's been going on ever since. In 1775, Richard Parris has quite a little enterprise going down here at the Reed River Falls. He has an Indian trading store, a grist mill, a sawmill, 100 acres under cultivation. Has some very nice horses down there. However, in December of 1775, Richard Parris is captured for stirring up the people in the western part of South Carolina. He is captured, taken down to Charlestown, and placed in jail. In 1776, July, the Cherokees, along with the Shawnee, Delaware, and Mohawk tribe, raised the frontiers of just about all the eastern seaboard. They were trying to take back their land from people encroaching in there and settling illegally. An expedition was raised against the Cherokees. They came down through what is now Greenville County into Lawrence County and back up through Spartanburg County. They killed several families. One of the most prominent was the Hyatt family, a friend of Richard Parris. Jacob Hyatt, with his wife and his son, his daughter was killed. No, his wife, excuse me, his daughter was not killed. He had a son previously killed. They took the daughter and headed back into the Cherokee Nation. All we know is we found a record where she was released on a mountaintop. We don't know where. After the Revolutionary War, James Hyatt's daughter was found living among the Seminoles down in Florida. An expedition was raised against the Cherokees. This was commanded by Colonel Andrew Williams. The first place they went to was Richard Parris's home. They took everything he had, burned everything he had. Took his wife and 3 children, put them in an open wagon, said, go to Augusta. Down to Augusta. There was no Highway 25 at this time. There was no food, no water. They had to forage for themselves. Then they proceeded into the lower towns of the Cherokees, which they destroyed. They joined General Rutherford of North Carolina and marched into the upper towns of the Cherokee. These were also destroyed. In the Greenville County Library, there is a journal called the Ross Journal, and it is a journal of this expedition. It's makes for some good reading. And it was from 8 July until 11 October, 1776. In late July, Richard Parris is released from jail down at Charlestown, and he comes back to his plantation. Of course, there's nothing there. He actually tried to join the American cause, but they wouldn't have him. Let me say one thing about Richard Parris. Richard Parris was a scoundrel. Nobody liked Richard Parris. You can't name anyone in colonial America that did not know Richard Parris. He knew everyone. He went back down to Charlestown after the British took it. And he served with the British Army in Florida, Georgia, and Mississippi. and then came back to South Carolina. One of the articles I read was from Richard Parrish, and says, on my arrival there, when he was coming from Mississippi, ordered by General Clinton to go to the frontier of South Carolina to raise Army friends of the Army, which I completed in a matter of 5,000 to 6,000 men. Then disarmed the rebels from the Savannah River to the Broad River of North Carolina, destroyed their forts, imprisoned their leaders to a number of 40, took 3,000 stands of arms, 22 swords, 27 blunderbusses, and a quantity of ammunition. And then, you know, sometimes fate changes things. Well, something happened that actually changed the fate of our nation. No longer than he had completed this task than a British Colonel Innes and a Colonel Balfour arrived. He gave all these prisoners their freedom, gave them their arms back, and sent them back home. These are the same people who fought at Kings Mountain. If Richard Parrish had kept them, there may not have been a Battle of Kings Mountain. On May the 20th, 1777, with their villages destroyed, the Cherokees met delegates from South Carolina and Georgia at DeWitt's Corner, we know this is due west, and signed a peace treaty. The Cherokees lost all of their lands in South Carolina, except for a small mountaintop in what is now Oconee County. In July, the Cherokees signed the Treaty of Long Island Hosting with North Carolina and Virginia. In 1783, the Revolutionary War is over. Richard Parrish has got his family back together and they moved to Bermuda. Richard Parrish in 1783 filed a claim for the lands he had lost during the Revolutionary War. With Richard Parrish's luck, the ship sinks. So it's never filed. On May the 21st, 1784, the newly acquired lands were open for land sale. Thomas Brandon purchased 640 acres along the Reedy River, including the Richard Parrish site. Guess who, that was prime land. Guess who was the commissioner of land sales? Thomas Brandon. He sold the land to himself.
Second case of fraud.
That's two. In 1785, Richard Parrish refiled his claim, and he has paid for his losses during the Civil War, and he was paid quite handsomely. Richard Parrish, after the Revolution, apparently he did come back to what is now the United States, especially down in Florida and Georgia. He died in 1794. And the sad thing about his will in it, nowhere in his will does he mention his son George, who probably did more for him than anyone else. George saw what was coming with the removal of the Cherokees, and he went to Oklahoma early. On March the 22nd, 1786, a new county is formed from these Indian lands. And this county is named Greenville, Greeneville. Greenville. The legislature did not say why the extra E is, but we have the idea that it's named for Nathaniel Greene, Washington's Southern commander during the Revolutionary War, although he wasn't liked down here in South Carolina. Parrish Mountain, P-A-R-I-S. Parrish spelled his name P-E-A-R-I-S. Greenville, G-R-E-E-N-E. Wait a minute now. There's two E's we've lost. What's going on here? over by Spartanburg County, there's a little town called Chesney. And it's named after the Chesney family. Chesney. How do we spell Chesney? Chesnee. They snuck over here and got one of our E's. We want that E back. Okay, this takes us up through the formation of Greenville County. And that's about half the program. But I'm going to stop there. If you, maybe sometimes you want me to come back, I'll come back and do the second half, which is from the formation of Greenville County up to the present day. Any questions?
How did the guy get away, even though the rule that what he was doing was illegal, and the courts ruled, and they still didn't apply the judgment? I mean, how did he get away with that? I mean, he went back to his place and then he kicked him out.
Well, you got to realize how many people were around at that time. And certainly the government of South Carolina wasn't going in Cherokee Nation. Because, ooh, that wouldn't be too good.
How did he survive the Cherokee? How did the Cherokee not go after him when he was in the land? I mean, they had to have the way, I mean, a reason to go and kick him out or kill him.
The Cherokee?
The Cherokee.
Oh, he was a trader among the Cherokees. Yeah, and the Cherokee family. And actually, George wasn't a half-breed, he was a quarter breed. His mother was a, quote, half-breed.
I have a question. I live about 3 miles out of town, and I have about 5 acres of creek. At one time, 3 creeks came together. And in the 35 years I've been there, I found lots of points. Most of them broken. But it amazed me the different minerals that were made out. There was something called gneiss, it was a striking material. And I found Savannah rivers.
Yeah, it sounded like a Flint River out of Georgia. The material sounds like Flint River out of Georgia for the point.
Well, they call it gneiss. I think it's GM, something like that. The fellow from the state, which I did what you told me to do, I called Tom Charles,
Right.
he sent a representative out.
Right.
And he said this was formed on the inside of the mountains. It was a formation, the different, but I found white quartz. I found one bar of mountain perfectly clear quartz, absolutely perfectly clear. I found things that were made out of chert, black flint, all in that same area. Now, how in the world would that many minerals end up in a 5 acre block?
Because they traded among themselves. If they didn't, in Greenville County, things were made out of quartz.
Yeah.
You have milky quartz, you have honey quartz, you have clear quartz, you have white quartz, and clear. So most likely that's local material. Now you see these black points?
Right.
Tennessee. I can see it immediately and tell you where it's from. Tennessee. I'll pass this around. Now this one I made. This is out of clear quartz.
If you want to see a real one, go to Fountain and use
Well,
it.
that's a real one.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking about.
You talking about an artifact?
I'm talking about what?
Artifact?
Yes.
Okay. I get that all the time.
Well, I did like you said. I gave it to the Fountain and Museum there in Moses Place.
Okay. Well, let me tell you the difference between artifact and a contemporary point. A lot of people don't ever go to a jockey lot and buy a point. Trust me, don't do it. It came out of a cave in Tennessee. I know exactly where it came from. I'm a flint napper, and I make points. I make them. After a while, archaeology, the bones don't agree to get down and dig somewhere. So I started doing this. The rock that Indians used 10,000 years ago and rock I use today is the exact same rock. Now, if it's an artifact, it was made 10,000 years ago. What I have, it is a point. It's just as good as it's probably better than what they had. but it's a contemporary point. So that's the difference.
But I guess my question is, did they trade to bring these different?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So they traded.
Okay, now one of the oldest archaeological sites on North America is right here in South Carolina, down at Allendale. It's called the Topper site. And if you were going to go on the computer and look it up, you can actually, I don't know, they still working down there? They still working during summer? You can go down and work for about a week. They'll charge you, but you can go down and work on the site.
When you come down my creek, you like to.
Do what?
I said, you can come down my creek for nothing.
I'll be down there, trust me.
My creek has a fault line in it. And I don't know if that makes any difference.
No.
All kinds of minerals in it.
No, where you want to look is near a river, especially around a bend. If the a creek has a bend or something in it, start looking in that area and start looking up on the high ground, and you'll find little tiny chips of rock.
Oh, yeah.
This is called debitage, and those are the chips that are flaked off.
And the two somethings, I call them bifacial tools that was made out of ice, just sharp as they could be. They would be in all different shapes.
Okay, bifacial means two-sided. You had a uniface and you had a biface.
Which means they would live in their environment, skin.
Yeah.
animals.
And if they broke it, they just resharpen it. Use it as scrapers. There's all kind of things they could use. Yes.
When you cross the Falls Bridge, you cross Reading River first, there's stone structures down there. Were they all part of Richard Paris's?
No, that is part of Vardry Macby. And see, that's in the second part of the program. One's 1816, the other one's 1829. That's the old Vardry Macby Mills. Now, the actually brick that you can see down there, when they tore that down in 1920, they moved all that rock out to East North Street. And if you know where Stroessner's used to be, across the street, Overbrook, it looks like a castle back there. But if you look right in the center, there's a square, and it's bricks. And not bricks, but rocks. And that's where those rocks came from, was the old Vardry Mill.
Was anything left of Richard Paris's?
No.
Nothing left?
We still don't know exactly where it was at. We think we know it's where the old cigar factory is on River Street and what's that street? It's where the old Greenville Courthouse was. Liberty Life Building, right down beside it, behind it. Carpenter Brothers Drugs, it was right behind Carpenter Brothers.
Richard, let me ask you something. Years ago, they tore down Greenville Junior High School and built the waterworks. And there was an article in the paper that when they were excavating for the foundations, they found a 5,000-year-old axe. Have you,
I was there.
okay?
I worked on that project. That's what actually started the project. A guy brought it to us, said, look what I found up there. We got with the construction company. They stopped for about 3 or 4 days and gave us access. We found the old cellar for the Vardry Macby house, found some points, found the garbage dump, a lot of inkwells. That was the old site of the old Central High School. Yeah, and we turned all that over to the waterworks people, and they were supposed to display it, and I've never seen anything.
That's right.
Is there a lot of stuff being uncovered of all the construction that's going on around here?
I try to, if they're turning dirt, I try to just field survey it, just get up and just walk over it. But what you want to do is wait till a good rain. And if there's something there, it's going to sit up like a little golf ball.
Absolutely.
And something else, when you're hunting points, you're ever out hunting points, go on a straight line, turn right around, and come back that same line. The sun reflection is going to be different. Something you wouldn't have seen this way, you'll see coming back. A lot of people, go ahead.
Have you ever heard I've always been told that there was a an Indian graveyard out here on Fairview Road, around where all the new buildings and all the businesses are. But I've always heard there's an Indian graveyard out there, Fairview. Have you ever heard that?
There were no villages in this area.
Okay, so I don't guess it was.
No.
Just a nice story.
I hear that all the time too.
Are there any Indian villages in South Carolina at all? Are there any Indian villages in South Carolina?
Up at the Catawba, up in reservation at Rock Hill. And you'll find one big mound at Lexington down in Columbia. And during the Revolution, the British put cannon on top of it. And it's a pretty good mound.
Where is Morrill Mountain?
Morrill Mountain out of the Charlotte area northwest.
Okay. And over in Lawrence County, the Indian Mountain Road, was there an Indian Mountain over there?
There could have been an Indian mound over there. I doubt if there's anything left.
Okay.
People dig into them like they think there's burials in there and all kinds of artifacts and stuff. Let me tell you something. If you go out digging somewhere and you come across a burial, don't ever tell anybody. Don't take any artifact. Just cover it up and go on your merry way.
There's a body there, you better leave it alone, right?
You'll go to jail. There's a federal law and a state law. And they will take everything you've got. Any more?
One of the most common thing that I found out that I told you about was Morrill Mountains. That was the Morrill. But I did find one made out, it was almost looked like a knife. It was so big, it was the Savannah River. And there was some Kirks.
Kirks of the Owens, 8,000 BC.
But the fellow that came out representing Tommy Charles, he said it was probably a hunting camp or maybe a winter camp. It might have come and
Right.
those three streams come together.
Right.
And there's a high area above that. And, it had to be a long, long time ago from the age that you say the Morrill Mountains were.
About 3,000 to 5,000 BC.
But it's amazing that the people here.
They were here. As a matter of fact, I went out and surveyed the Greenville Tech site, the northwest. And I tried to tell them that, and we found, I think, 13 Morrill Mountain points, and we tried to tell them that those were the first students out there.
When I found that perfectly clear Morrill Mountain, I mean, it was perfectly clear. All I saw was the outline of it until I picked it up and wiped it off, and I thought I found the star of the South. I rushed in the house and asked my wife, let me borrow her diamond to see if it would scratch it. And she wasn't hot on that idea at all.
You may have found something from the lost colony. That was Virginia Dares. This one's turned over. This is a Morrill Mountain. I mean a Savannah River right there.
Yep.
And basically they were used as knives.
Yeah. This looks like it could have been a knife.
Yeah, that's what they were. And they would put on a four-shot stick. And they'd carry a little pouch and stick them in.
Well, if you go to the Historical Museum in Chester, it's filled with artifacts, Native Indian artifacts, fascinating. They have them all over the place. So if you want to go down there and see those. Also, there's a Native American Museum in Seneca, right? Or
I believe there is, a new one.
down the shores.
But if you ever want to go out hunting, just go out in the woods somewhere, not with the leaves or anything on it, and just go around the stream or something, just look around. See if you can find something. Like I say, you'd be the first person, maybe 3,000 to 8,000 years to touch that.
If you're looking for Clovis Points, do you have to start digging down?
They have found some surface ones down at Topper site. I think that's what really started off was they found Clovis.
Oh,
You know, one of the things that the fellow at the state told me, he said it was used all over the state for so long by early American, the early Indians, that there's hardly an acre of land in this state that if you didn't look hard enough, you would find something.
Oh, they're all over the place. And that's something else I didn't cover, but I'd really like to. Indians. We know that Indians is what? That is not the people. That's the name that the Europeans gave the people. They were indigenous people. Were the indigenous people on the West Coast first? Possibility or not. Maybe Salutians out of France. May predate them. But the Clovis culture, it was around an extremely short period of time and everything died off. And they think what happened was a comet or an asteroid hit up in Canada. And we had another mini ice age, and it killed off all the big animals and the people that were here. Now at the Clovis sites, one thing they look for is a material called nano diamonds. And that's only caused by asteroids or meteors, something like that. And right at the Clovis site, right above it, there's a layer of nano diamonds. Any more? Come up and take a look if you want to at some of the stuff we got up here.
Sure.
Appreciate y'all coming.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.